This story will break your heart first, but then it'll fill it with joy. Stay with me and you won't regret it. The Duke of Stirling was really good at one thing: pretending. He had this way of deciding that if something in his life was a bit too much to handle, it simply didn't exist. On the night our story really begins, he was all alone, which was nothing new for him, wrapped in total silence. But this wasn't just any silence. The entire east wing of Stirling Hall had been dead quiet for 5 long years. It wasn't the kind of quiet you get when a room is just empty for a bit. No, this was the worst kind, a deliberate silence. It was the kind of silence kept by a man who's convinced himself that if he just ignores something inconvenient, it'll disappear. It was pure, simple denial. On that life-changing night, he was tucked away in his study. Outside, a nasty snowstorm was rattling the windows, and the Duke was just doing what he always did, working. Papers, parliamentary stuff, managing estates. He was obsessed with protecting his legacy at any cost. But then, right through the sound of the wind, he heard something: music. He actually stopped. Piano music? A melody was drifting through those dark, dusty hallways. It didn't sound like someone practicing a lesson. It sounded like someone playing straight from the soul. He hadn't stepped foot in the East Wing for 14 months. He knew the exact number because he'd tried so hard not to count. You know how it is. The things we pretend to forget are the ones we remember most. The East Wing was where his wife and son lived. He followed that music out of his study, down the passages, and finally through a door he hadn't touched in over a year. What he saw on the other side, well, it completely wrecked the walls he'd spent 5 years building. It was his little boy, just sitting there alone in the dark, playing the piano. The boy stopped playing when he heard the door. He turned his head toward Sebastian and smiled. Then, in the sweetest, most innocent voice you can imagine, the voice of a kid who'd only ever heard wonderful things about his dad, he spoke. "My mother said you were this big," he said, stretching his tiny hands out wide. "Are you my daddy?" To understand how we got here, we have to go back 5 years to when Clara Voss, the Duchess, the little boy's mother, had her baby. At first, everything seemed perfect: a healthy, strong baby boy, the heir Sebastian had been dreaming of to carry on the family name. For a few hours, the cold old Stirling Hall actually felt warm and full of life. But then the doctors pulled the Duke aside for a private chat. Little Leo Voss, the future Duke, had been born completely blind. You might be wondering, how could they know so fast back then? Well, by the 1860s, eye doctors were getting pretty sophisticated. A few years earlier, in 1851, a German doctor, Hermann von Helmholtz, had invented the ophthalmoscope, which let physicians look right inside the eye for the first time. The doctor at Stirling Hall used one and saw the truth right away. It was a structural condition, something Leo was born with that couldn't be fixed. No surgery, no medicine, nothing would change it. The doctor had to break the news to a man who expected perfection. The heir to Stirling would never be able to see the world around him. Sebastian took the news the way he took everything that didn't fit his plans, with a blank face and total silence. He didn't scream or cry. He just asked a couple of business-like questions, thanked the doctors, and that was it. He didn't go back to his wife's room, Clara, that night. Sebastian was a product of 5 generations of men who thought weakness was a disease and duty meant being perfect. To him, being a duke wasn't about being a man, it was about being an image. He'd never questioned it. It was as much a part of him as his own heartbeat. In his mind, Leo's blindness wasn't just a challenge, it was a disgrace. The thing we have to understand here is that Sebastian wasn't a villain. He just couldn't tell the difference between being a duke and being a coward. For 5 years, he'd make a huge mistake by confusing the two. He made a decision within a week that would change everything. Meanwhile, Clara had no idea what he was thinking. She was in that new mom haze, exhausted but totally in love with this tiny person in her arms. She'd spent the night counting his toes and watching him sleep, realizing he was completely irreplaceable. She kept waiting for Sebastian to come in, but the lamp burned out and he never showed. The next morning, a nurse brought a cold message from his secretary saying she should rest and she'd be informed of developments. Informed of developments. Can you believe that? Like she was a business partner instead of a mother. It was actually a young housemaid who spilled the beans, not on purpose, but she let it slip that the doctors had found something. Clara pushed for the truth, and the girl finally told her Leo was blind. Clara sat with that news for a long time. She cried, but then she looked at Leo. He was just there, healthy, adorable, and perfect. She held him close and realized she didn't care what the doctor said. She expected to feel like something was wrong, but all she felt was that he was her son. A huge wave of love hit her, and suddenly her husband's absence didn't matter. She just cuddled him, amazed by how much love she could feel. To her, nothing had changed. Her son was her son. Whatever Sebastian decided to do was his problem, not hers. She was sure he would come around and be in love with the baby the same way she was. But then the hammer dropped. When Sebastian finally got to see her, he told her the baby and her were moving to the East Wing. Leo was to be raised in secret, away from society. He talked about it like he was managing an estate, not hiding his own child. Clara looked at him and knew exactly how much this cowardice was going to cost them both. Their marriage was practically over. She didn't even bother arguing. She knew Sebastian had already made up his mind, so she made up hers. She was a mother now, and she wasn't going to let him rob her of that. She cried a line looking at her son and decided right there that she was going to raise her boy and she was going to do it right. She'd give him everything Sebastian was too scared to give him. There was nothing broken in the East Wing. Leo just needed a world that worked for him. So she built that world herself, ignoring her despicable husband entirely. Now, to be fair, Victorian society was pretty terrible about disability. Aristocrats usually sent imperfect family members away to private institutions to avoid scandal. It was considered the responsible thing to do back then. Sebastian didn't send Leo away, but he did something almost worse. He kept him in the house but refused to look at him for 5 years. We'll have to decide for ourselves if that makes him better or worse than men who just got rid of their kids entirely. Clara didn't waste time overthinking it. She was too busy making life beautiful for her son. The East Wing actually wasn't a bad place to be. Clara decided early on that self-pity was a waste of time. The rooms were big and sunny, and she realized that light was important for Leo, not because he could see it, but because he could feel it. He would feel the sun on his face and the change in the air. With help from some loyal servants and her sister, she turned that wing into a sanctuary. Her mother also visited all the time too. That little boy brought so much joy to everyone around him. The first thing she did was fill the place with music boxes. Back then, music boxes weren't just toys. They were the marvels of the age. They were beautiful, Swiss-crafted wooden boxes. But for Leo, they were a gateway to a whole new world. Inside the box, a clever clockwork mechanism used tiny pins to pluck a steel comb, creating these delicate, shimmery melodies. But the real magic was in the touch. For a boy who navigated the world through his fingertips, these boxes were incredible. He could press his palms against the smooth, resonant wood and feel the literal heartbeat of the gears turning as the music played. It wasn't just sound, it was something he could feel vibrating right through his skin. She even got a speaking clock so Leo always knew the time. They read everything to him: poetry, history, mythology, because Clara knew he was brilliant and didn't need things dumbed down. He just needed the world described to him. She and the servants taught him the house by touch. When Sebastian was away, they'd walk the halls and tell him the stories of the stone and the wood. This wall is older than that one, or this banister has a chip your grandpa made. She gave him the house through stories. She even gave him his father as a story. She never said a single bad word about Sebastian. When Leo asked about his dad, and he asked all the time, Clara would tell him he had a noble father who was just very busy with important work, but who loved him and would come when the time was right. When Leo was 3, a piano arrived. Clara had worked with a specialist who said an instrument would help him navigate by feel. To buy the piano, Clara had sold a piece of jewelry she had brought from her family home, not sterling jewelry her own, a sapphire brooch that had been her mother's. She purchased a second-hand upright that 2 footmen carried up the East Wing staircase on a Tuesday morning in March. She had not asked Sebastian's permission. She would never ask for permission, ever. She had not told him. She had learned by then that the most efficient approach to the East Wing's domestic arrangements was simply to manage them herself and submit the accounts at the end of each quarter, which Sebastian signed without reading. What happened next was like magic. Leo sat down and just mapped the keys with his hands. And within an hour, he wasn't just hitting notes. He was making music. It was intentional and beautiful right from the start. A teacher came to help, but after a few visits, she told Clara that Leo didn't play like a blind child. He played like a true musician. He was born with it. Your son does not play the piano the way blind children are taught to play. He plays the way musicians play. These are not the same thing, and the difference is not something I can teach him. He was born with it. By age 5, he was composing his own stuff. It was complex and smart. He just got how music was supposed to feel. Clara would stand in the doorway and listen. It seemed effortless for him, like the music was just trapped inside and the piano was his way of letting it out. Those nights, Clara felt this quiet certainty. No matter what Sebastian was trying to protect by hiding them away, the real legacy was right here, playing in the dark. He just hadn't bothered to listen yet. Now, don't think Clara just hated him. She had loved him once. They used to have these really sweet, quiet nights where he'd actually be himself, funny and smart. She'd seen the man underneath the title. He'd listen to her and value her opinion. But she hadn't realized how fragile that warmth was until it was tested. When things got hard, he failed. He chose stoicism over his own family. But Clara didn't have the energy to hate him. She was too busy living. She just felt sorry for him. This man who had everything but understood the value of nothing. She felt it most when Leo played his piano late at night. And that brings us back to that snowy night when Leo was 5. One night, the year Leo turned 5, a storm pressing in from the north, she was doing exactly that. Leo was playing something new, something she had not heard before. Longer than his usual pieces, more restless, so beautiful and joyful. Sebastian was in his study, and for some reason, he finally put his pen down. Something about that music finally reached him through the walls. It wasn't loud, but it was there, drifting like warmth through old stone. He didn't even know there was a piano in the east wing. He finally felt the weight of what he'd done. He had not seen Leo since he was a baby. He understood this now with a force that was almost physical. 5 years. 5 years of this child existing 40 yards from his study, growing, learning, becoming a person, and Sebastian had not been present for a single moment of it. Not one. The music continued, and Sebastian stood in the dark doorway. This child, his child who was playing in the dark because the dark was simply his world, and he had made something extraordinary from it. The music stopped. When the music stopped, Leo turned right toward him. He wasn't scared, he just smiled that perfect smile. He was not startled, he was not afraid, he simply turned his head and smiled. A beautiful and uncomplicated smile of a child who has been told good things about the person he cannot see and is simply glad that person has finally arrived. He walked over and Sebastian knelt down. Leo put his tiny hands on his father's face, reading him for the first time. And then he asked that heartbreaking question, "My mother said you were this big. Are you my daddy?" Sebastian, the big, tough Duke, just broke down and cried. He grabbed Leo and sobbed for the lost time and the music he'd missed. He realized Leo wasn't the one who was broken, he was. He grabbed Leo and hugged him so hard and wept out loud. He wept for the 5 years and for the music he had not heard. For the hands on his face that held no accusation, only curiosity, only the simple and devastating openness of a child who has not yet learned that the world sometimes fails to show up. He cried because Leo was not broken, had never been broken. And the only broken thing in this room was the man on his knees on the floor. And Leo was already, without knowing it, beginning to put him back together. Clara found them like that a few minutes later. She didn't say a word. She'd always told Leo he would come, and finally she was right. She had not known until this moment that she had been right. The next morning was awkward, of course. You can't just undo 5 years of emotional repression overnight. This does not excuse what he did to Clara and Leo, but he was giving a second chance. Clara didn't make it easy for him either. She was civil, but she was waiting to see if he was for real this time. She let him spend time with Leo. Sebastian was pretty stiff at first. He didn't know how to talk to a kid, let alone one who couldn't see him. Also, he didn't realize Leo needed noise to get around and constant chatting, not the sudden silence that grown-ups often resort to when they're feeling deep emotions. Sitting next to Leo at the piano, the Duke, who was usually super capable, had absolutely nothing helpful to offer. But Leo was patient. He taught his dad how to announce himself and how to describe the world. He eventually went to Clara to apologize. "I don't know how to apologize for this," he said. "I've been trying to find the words for 3 days and I don't have them." Clara set down her pen. "I'm not asking you to apologize." "Then what are you asking?" She looked at him steadily. "I'm asking you to stay, not to visit, not to manage from a distance and feel better about yourself. To actually be here consistently in a way Leo can count on. Not because you feel guilty, but because you have decided to be his father." A pause. "Your terms with me are a separate matter. That will take considerably longer." Sebastian looked at his wife across the room. This woman who had raised their son alone for 5 years, had never spoken ill of him to the boy, had built a world from what he abandoned, and was now telling him clearly and without cruelty exactly what she needed. Sebastian realized how lucky he was to have her, and he agreed to her terms. "Those are fair terms," he said. "They are the only terms," she said. He started showing up. Breakfast, reading stories at night. He even started walking in the garden with Leo. By trying to describe things for his son, Sebastian actually started seeing the world properly for the first time himself. Clara watched him carefully, giving him credit when he got it right and calling him out when he didn't. She didn't pretend everything was fine immediately, but she was fair. By Christmas, Sebastian decided it was time to stop hiding. He wanted to take Leo into the world. They had a small party at the hall with their family. Sebastian talked to Leo about it, and Leo only had one question: "Will you be there?" It wasn't perfect. Some people were awkward, but when Leo played the piano, the whole room went silent, not out of pity, but because it was beautiful. Afterward, Sebastian and Clara stood together at the window. It wasn't happily ever after yet, but it was a start. He stood beside her and said nothing. They had not recovered the ease of their early marriage. That would take longer, and he had accepted that. But she did not move away when he stood close, and after a moment, without looking at him, she said quietly, "He played well tonight." It wasn't full forgiveness, but it was a door left slightly open, and sometimes that's the most important thing of all. Sebastian said, "Yes, he did." And they stood together at the window until the last light disappeared down the drive. This is the story of Sebastian, Clara, and Leo, and it is not quite finished. Their journey to London, to the grandest ball of the season, to the moment Sebastian opens those doors with his family beside him. That is a story for part 2. If you want to hear it, subscribe to Lovely History and you will not miss it. And before you go, tell me where you are listening from tonight. Drop it in the comments. I read every single one.